Speaking of naming, something you'll be doing a lot of is naming variables. Now, what are variables? Variables are like constants in the sense that they are values that we can define throughout our program. But the main difference is that with constants, you set that value early on and it can never change throughout the lifetime of that program. So from beginning to end, that value will remain the same. Whereas for variables, we can set a value and we can give it a name and we can refer to it throughout the program. And if we need to, we can always go back and change that value. So for example, let's say you're performing a complex calculation. You can go ahead and take that result, store it in a variable, and refer to it throughout the program rather than having to repeat that calculation every time you need to get to that value. So you save yourself the computational power, but also, if you think about it, really the mental power in terms of reading through that program and understanding its complexity. So there's tons of benefits to variables. And let's go through an example here in our example program. We start off with the preprocessor at the top. We declare our namespace. And then down here, we start right off the bat with the two variables that we're creating. So we have the data type of the variable, and then we have the name of the variable. Now you can see here it ends with a semicolon. So we know that that statement has ended and we haven't given that variable gvar1 a value. So this is called implicit initialization. And it's when we create that variable, we don't give it a value. It does have a value, which would be 0, but because we're not explicitly giving it a value, it's just going to take that default. The second variable here, gvar2, we are actually giving a value. So we're using the equal sign and then assigning a value on the right-hand side. Now, you can see in the comments that these two are listed as global variables. And what we mean by that is that they are accessible throughout all functions in that we have within this program. If we were to, for example, create another variable within the body of the main function, let's say we just write it down here, right? Which we do have this here this char variable. That variable would only be accessible or visible to the code that's ran in here within the main function. If we had another function below the main, then that other function wouldn't have access to our char variable. Whereas the gvar variable is inside the main function and any other subsequent functions we may choose to create. Okay. So speaking of our char function, so we've set the data type as char, so we know it's a character, and then we name it ch, and we store the a capitalized a value. That we know is a local variable. So next we have here the following lines, which actually print out the values of those variables. So value of gvar1, and then this will print out, as we were discussing, 0. Value of gvar2, that's going to print 2, and then the character in ch. Okay. Now next here, we are initializing two variables on the same line. Because they both share the data type, we don't need to declare that data type twice. We can save ourselves that step. And we are implicitly initializing sum and then explicitly initializing number. So sum, as far as all goes, is set to 0, and then number is set to 3. And in here, we are using sum to store the result of a calculation, as we had also discussed. So we have here the number variable, which is, if we recall, is 3, and then we're adding 5. So if my math is correct, that will actually output on the following line to 8. Okay? So think of variables as sort of like the working memory. To keep track of certain values, we can just refer to them by their name. So it's quite handy, and you'll be doing a lot of creations of functions throughout the building of your programs. We have to make sure that whenever we create a variable, we give it a meaningful name. So it has to be a name that is easy to understand the purpose of that variable, not only to other programmers, but also to yourself later on down the road when you need to understand your own code and remember